No one part of this world can survive on its own. And so you can close yourself inward. What happens in one part of the world affects you. And so this is the time we should be pulling our energies together and thinking together. And yet, unfortunately, it says, I mean, why should we continue taking care about floods in Pakistan? Why should we take care of orphans in Bangladesh? Let's spend that money on ourselves. You can't survive alone. This world is not a cocoon. We were all put on this world together. We'll survive together or we'll perish together. And so I think it's the wrong time for people to start looking inward and talking about cutting ODA. You know, we must all decide. By 2050, we're going to be 9 billion people on this planet. We'll survive as 9 billion people. How are we going to feed all those people? We must think about those solutions together and not think about existing as isolated pockets on this planet. It's not possible, unfortunately.
There are things within your control in Ghana that are continuing to be challenging. One of them is the public sector deficit and the huge public sector wage bill at the moment. Are you doing enough to contain that?
We are preparing for the 2011 budget. We recognize that as a challenge. Negotiations are continuing with Labour with regards to the new pay reform. Our government is in a peculiar position. We inherited the pay reform program, and there was no way to roll it back. The only way was to go forward, but to negotiate it with Labour. And I think that being honest with Labour is what will see us through. I mean, we should show them what the economic numbers are. They all are Ghanaians, and they are interested to see Ghana survive as a nation. And so if you show them the numbers, they will be reasonable in negotiation. There are tough challenges coming up going into next year because we have to consider the arrears that need to be paid based on the new pay structure. And if the economy can take it, fine. I'm happy to have us pay and let everybody have a nice time. But if the economy can take it and we're going to pay it and have the economy crash around our ears, I'm sure that organized labor are not just some monster who don't understand that, you know, you need a functioning country to continue to exist as a labor union. And so when the time comes, we would negotiate and, you know, find what the most reasonable way forward is.
Are you saying you anticipate cuts then?
No, I anticipate difficulties and challenges in negotiation, but I think that everybody should be reasonable. I was with the teachers recently. They are in the process of negotiating, and I said that they should negotiate with patience and tolerance, and everybody should have a view to the survival of Ghana as a nation and the budgets and what is available. And I think that the union leaders are people we can work with.
I just want to come and focus on oil now. Oil is due to start being exported at the end of this year, and I know that it's predicted that up to 240,000 barrels will be pumped by 2014 or 2015. There are still concerns about transparency. Now, I know that's something you've emphasised, that you're very committed to transparency and accountability, but the Revenue Watch Index has still said that the public availability of information about oil is woefully limited. Is your government doing enough to try and address that lack of information?
I wouldn't know in what sense this is limited. I think that we have tried to put out as much information as possible. And we currently have all the legislations that are going to regulate the oil industry going to Parliament. Parliament is reconvening in October, and these are going to be debated, you know, in the Parliament, representative of the people. And the people are going to have a say in what legislation governs, you know, the regulation of oil. So I don't know what information is not available. I mean, what happens is, for all the exploration permits and concessions that we give in Ghana, the law says that they must be granted by Parliament. And so all these exploration licenses have been approved by Parliament. If anybody goes to the Parliament of Ghana, copies of the exploration permits are available. And so if people say, I mean, they don't have access to information, I don't know what information. If I know what information, then we can make that information available to them. If it's information between two companies negotiating the sale of, you know, some license or something, they have their non-disclosure agreements, and so, of course, it won't be made public. But if you want information on Ghana's oil industry, just go to the Parliament of Ghana and ask for the exploration permits and the licenses. They are all there.
Is it time that Ghana had a freedom of information law? I know Liberia has recently passed one. It's the first West African country to do so. Would that help transparency, and is it something that you would commit to as a government?
I don't think it would increase transparency. Ghana is probably the most transparent, probably more transparent than UK, I dare say, or America. We have a very vibrant and robust media, and they'll find information if they want that information. Fine, it's the fashion to pass freedom of information bills. One of the first things our government did was we found a freedom of information bill stuck somewhere within the corridors of power. We took it to cabinet, we approved it, and we sent it to parliament. And so it's in the hands of parliament to debate it and pass it. But I don't think that you would have more transparency in Ghana than we have currently. I mean, if you wanted more transparency, then I don't know at what level we're talking about. We'll probably have all the journalists sitting in cabinet while we take decisions and all that kind of thing. But I think for information in Ghana, it's freely available, and the journalists know where to look for it. And there's no restriction on how they get it. But we'll pass the Freedom of Information Bill. It's in Parliament.
Is that something that you personally support?
Yeah, I support it. As Minister of Communications, when the discussion on the Freedom of Information started, and I participated in some of the workshops that led to it coming out, you know. And I think that I support it. Indeed, we probably might find it a bit more restrictive, because if you look at some of the exemptions that are indicated there, you know, it would have been better to keep quiet about those exemptions, because then journalists probably will get access to information, you know, if they wanted it. But then if you enclose it in the exempt list, then it makes bureaucrats know that, no, I can't give this information out without, you know, some recourse to the law. But I guess it's something that we all have advocated. Let's let it come into law, let's practice it and see how it goes.
And what about the regulatory structure around the oil? There was a report just last week from the Environmental Protection Agency that said that there was not adequate equipment capacity to monitor and handle problems in the emerging oil and gas industries. Are those regulatory shortcomings being addressed at the moment, and do you appreciate the urgency of that situation?
Well, if you look at what happened in the Gulf of Mexico, you can tell that even for developed countries like the United States, I mean, those regulations are still never enough, and that it takes, you know, some doing to get the appropriate regulations in place. Not only just putting the regulations in place, but being able to monitor and supervise and make sure that the right thing is done. For us, the Gulf of Mexico is a wake-up call to everybody, you know, that you can't take risks in this industry. And if you look at the west coast of Africa and the number of countries that share, you know, the Gulf of Guinea, you know, any disaster, you know, offshore would spell doom for the livelihoods of quite a huge number of people who already find it a challenge to live from day to day. And so it means that we need to put in place, one, the appropriate regulations, and two, the capacity to be able to monitor the regulations. And so that's one of the issues that we're working at. Ghana on its own does not have the capacity, and so we need to use the UN organizations and all the other international organizations. We're closely collaborating with Norway and even the UK based on its experiences from the North Sea oil and all that, to try and see how best to bring our regulations up to track. And where we don't have the capacity to monitor those regulations, to get people with the capacity from outside to come and help us monitor it.
Is the legal system in Ghana strong enough at the moment to cope with the litigation and all of the arbitration and regulation that the oil industry is going to demand if Ghana really is going to do things differently to other West African countries?
Well, it's what we have, and it has to be. And so we do have training and retraining programs that are taking place and are going to take place to specialized judges and other legal officers in the particular area of oil and gas. We've recently set up the commercial courts to litigate contracts and so on and so forth. And the various judges and others involved in these courts are undertaking courses that allow them to understand that special area of the law. So it's the legal system we have. It's served us well, and I think that it will be ready.
Your Excellency, John Dramani Mahama, thank you very much. You've been watching Afua Talks.